I will never forget the day my mother quietly led me out of our living room, gently closing the door behind her, while the echoes of clapping and cheering still pulsed from the other side. I was 9 years old, a child already aware that the world I thought I belonged to could be snatched away with a single turn of a doorknob. My sister, Ivy, was singing, her soft mezzo-soprano voice enchanting every adult in attendance. The living room glowed in the warmth of that admiration, while I stood outside in the cold hallway, the spot where I realized that I was never the one meant to shine. My name is Claire Monroe. I grew up in the shimmering shadow of Ivy Monroe, 2 years older than me, and, to our parents, the embodiment of perfection. She wore princess dresses so naturally, you'd think she was born in a castle. Her hair was always brushed into sleek ponytails for ballet. Her lips parted in that darling smile whenever a camera was near, and her posture practiced from years of performing in front of mirrors. At 9, I didn't hate her, but I hated how she turned me into nothing without even meaning to. Ivy always had the starring role, from school recitals to family gatherings. My parents bragged about her for hours. Ivy can dance like a young professional. Ivy can sing like a nightingale. When I mentioned I liked to read, they nodded politely, then resumed praising Ivy's accomplishments. It was as if my words floated on the edges of their hearing, barely registering before evaporating into silence. I remember one evening, Ivy was no more than 10 and I was 8. We stood side by side in the kitchen, waiting for dinner. Dad made a joke, something about me not having any special talents, but it was said in that casual offhand tone that stings more than overt cruelty because he didn't even realize how it would feel to me. Ivy laughed, not maliciously, but because she didn't know any better either. She was used to receiving praise, not noticing the emptiness that mirrored it. Over time, I learned how to fade away whenever I heard the too familiar compliments that made me feel smaller. I'd retreat to my bedroom, pressing my back against the door, letting the hum of their voices fade into the walls. I'd read novels about adventurers and explorers, bold, fearless people who existed in worlds far removed from my own. I wrote short stories in a cheap spiral notebook Aunt Angela gave me when I was 7. She was the only one who ever treated me like I mattered. "Write down what you feel," Aunt Angela told me softly one summer day, pressing the notebook into my hands. "Your words deserve to be seen, even if the world keeps looking the other way." In that notebook, I invented entire universes, places where shy, overlooked girls discovered secrets that made them heroes. I scribbled pages and pages by flashlight under my blankets, half hoping someone would notice the glow and ask me about it. No one ever did. But at least I had my fantasy worlds, my private realm where I could exist without feeling second best. By the time I entered middle school, Ivy was dancing in competitions across the state. Mom and Dad spared no expense. Private lessons with a renowned ballet teacher, traveling for specialized workshops, elaborate costumes. Whenever I'd ask for something, even if it was just a better set of paintbrushes for an art project, they'd say, "Claire, we don't have the budget. You know your sister's training is crucial for her future." If I pressed, they'd sigh heavily, as though I was an ungrateful child who couldn't understand the bigger picture. At 13, I tried out for the school debate team, something I was terrified to do, but I forced myself because I hoped for one flicker of recognition. Got accepted. When I told my parents at dinner, they nodded with mild approval, then turned to Ivy. "How was your rehearsal, dear? Any exciting news about the upcoming competition?" My accomplishment was swallowed in seconds by talk of Ivy's dance routine. I was naive enough to think I could keep trying. Over the next few months, I came home brimming with news of debate tournaments, class projects, creative writing assignments. Each time I'd open my mouth, feeling a hopeful flutter in my chest. Each time, their eyes would drift back to Ivy, or they'd shift the conversation to a new costume or a new step she'd learned. By the time I was 14, I realized words wouldn't make a difference. I stopped sharing. I shut my bedroom door and wrote in silence. I devoured books like I breathed air, letting them fill the void. When no one praises you, you learn to praise yourself. Quietly, privately, so no one thinks you're making noise you don't deserve to make. That same year, Dad surprised Ivy with a trip to a big city ballet performance featuring a world-famous company. Mom took her out for fancy lunches, posted pictures on social media with captions like, "My girl is a future star." All the while I stayed home, alone, flipping through second-hand novels I borrowed from Aunt Angela. My mother never posted photos of me reading. She never bragged, "My girl can write stories that make you cry." In their world that didn't matter. But there was a crack in that perfect facade, a small wedge that began to grow. Ivy wasn't always as enthusiastic about dancing as they believed. Sometimes I'd find her in the kitchen late at night, tears streaking her cheeks, whispering, "I can't keep doing this." She'd see me freeze, and I'd walk away without a word. We never talked about it, but I realized it wasn't just me who felt trapped. Ivy was trapped in the pedestal they put her on, forced to keep being perfect whether she wanted to or not. But she never refused. And I never confronted her. Maybe we were both too scared of what would happen if we shattered the illusions our parents held dear. High school arrived, and so did the arguments about my future. Dad said, "Don't aim too high. Community college might be the best route for you, Claire." Mom nodded. "We'll need our finances to help Ivy attend a prestigious dance academy." Aunt Angela was the only one who told me, "You're smart enough for any university, dear. Don't let them tell you otherwise." I clung to her words like a lifeline. At 16, I discovered a passion for creative writing. A teacher named Mr. Ellis noticed my short stories and encouraged me to enter a statewide writing competition. I spent weeks polishing a fantasy novelette about a young girl overshadowed by a powerful sister, using every scrap of emotion that had burned inside me all these years. I wove a world of magic, heartbreak, and quiet triumph. I entered it, fully expecting nothing in return. To my astonishment, I won. I remember standing on stage at a small auditorium, receiving the gold certificate with trembling hands, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I searched the audience for my parents. They weren't there. They were busy with Ivy's final dance showcase for the semester. Aunt Angela came, though. She stood up and clapped until her hands were raw, tears glistening in her eyes. I held that certificate all the way home, feeling elation seep away like water in a leaky bucket. By the time I walked through the front door, the household was buzzing with talk of Ivy's performance. My mother was raving about how Ivy had nailed a flawless pirouette series. Dad was on the phone with relatives, bragging about the applause. I slipped inside quietly, the certificate pressed to my chest. "Hi, Claire," Mom said, hardly looking at me. "Any news from that writing thing you mentioned?" My voice cracked. I won first place." She paused, frowned. "Oh, well, good job," she said briskly, as if I'd told her I got a B+ in a regular exam. Then she went right back to talking about Ivy's showcase. I walked upstairs. I pinned the certificate on my corkboard in my bedroom, right above my desk, and I stared at it for a long time, a mixture of pride and heartbreak warring inside me. I resolved then, I might not matter to them, but I can matter to myself. Another year passed. Ivy was accepted into a competitive program at the National Ballet Institute. Mom and Dad practically soared with joy. They used my college fund, such as it was, to help pay for her advanced training, telling me, "You can always take out loans for your education, but Ivy needs this to succeed." I didn't even argue. I was so numb at that point it almost felt normal. The day of my high school graduation, Aunt Angela came with flowers that smelled of sweet promise. My parents arrived an hour late, missed the speech I gave as the salutatorian, and left immediately after hugging Ivy, who was there as well, purely for appearances, because they had to drive her to a rehearsal. I recall standing on the stage, still holding the microphone, scanning the crowd for any sign that they were proud. But they were already gone. I spent that summer working at a local bookstore and finalizing my applications to universities on my own. Aunt Angela donated her time and money to help me travel for interviews. When acceptance letters began to arrive, I felt a surge of hope. I got into Redwood University, a well-respected place for writing, literature, and business. But the tuition was steep. My parents scoffed. "We can't afford that, Claire. Be realistic. Why not community college? Dad told me over dinner, shrugging like it was no big deal. Meanwhile, they had recently sent Ivy to a summer intensive program in Europe. My mouth tasted bitter, and I silently counted the minutes until I could retreat to my bedroom, to my corkboard, to the only achievements that mattered to me. One day, I opened the mailbox to find a slender letter from Redwood, offering me a partial scholarship. Excitement fizzed in my veins. Partial, not full, but better than nothing. I showed my parents, my hands shaking with a combination of hope and fear. Mom glanced at the paper, gave a polite nod, and slid it aside. Dad said, "We can't help. Sorry." Ivy was in the kitchen, rummaging for snacks, and didn't even look my way. So that was that, I thought, as I sat on the stairs, the scholarship letter in my hand. An hour later, Aunt Angela pulled up in her old minivan. She came inside, greeted me with her usual warm smile, then asked me to sit with her in the living room. My parents and Ivy were out. She set a small envelope on the coffee table and said, "Claire, I've been saving money for a long time. I want you to use it for Redwood." I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a bank statement, showing an amount that wasn't massive, but enough to bridge the gap left by the partial scholarship. "Aunt Angela," I whispered, tears burning in my eyes, "I can't accept this from you. It's your life savings." She placed a hand on mine. "You are worth more than any number in a bank account," she said. "I see how hard you work, how much you deserve this chance. Don't let them steal your future." I collapsed into her arms, sobbing in a mix of gratitude and relief. At that moment, I realized that sometimes family isn't about who shares your bloodline, but who believes in you when no one else will. I told my parents I was leaving for Redwood. They didn't argue or even show much interest. "Ivy needs help with her next training program," Mom said. "So you're on your own." I nodded, swallowing my anger. Fine, I thought. On my own is how I've always been. With Aunt Angela's help, I arrived at Redwood University that fall. I was 18 with a battered suitcase, a heart full of determination, and a vow. I'd prove my worth to myself. I poured everything into my studies, majoring in creative writing with a minor in business. I joined the campus literary magazine, wrote articles for the local paper, interned at a small publishing house during the summers. I refused to let a single moment go to waste. All the while, I kept an eye on Ivy from a distance. Social media showed her traveling across Europe for various dance workshops, wearing designer leotards, photographed next to instructors of international fame. Whenever I talked to Aunt Angela, she'd say gently, "Claire, you're doing wonderfully. Don't worry about Ivy's path. Focus on your own." In my junior year, I wrote a novel, a near-future dystopia about a society that worshipped certain talents while discarding everyone else. It reflected everything I felt growing up in Ivy's shadow. I stayed up nights typing, rewriting, polishing, ignoring the parties and social events that typical college students enjoy. Aunt Angela read each draft, offered comments, and never told me to give up. Then, near the end of my senior year, I submitted the manuscript to the Redwood Writers' Fellowship competition. It was a long shot. Lots of talented writers entered, but I believed in my story. Weeks passed, I graduated with honors, and then the letter came in. I won. The fellowship included a stipend for me to refine the manuscript and pitch it to real agents and publishers. My chest almost exploded with pride. Finally, I thought. Finally, I can show the world I'm more than the invisible sister. That victory overshadowed every memory of my parents ignoring me, but it also rekindled a small spark of bitterness. Why did I have to do it alone? Why were they never there to see me cross the finish line? After graduation, Redwood's Writing Center offered me a part-time position, guiding younger students. Meanwhile, the fellowship gave me enough money to spend a few months purely focused on my novel. I rented a modest studio apartment near campus, devoting myself to writing by day and teaching by night. During those months, I found a sense of peace that I'd never known. I was living for me, not for someone else's applause or acceptance. One afternoon, I was revising a particularly tricky scene when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. It was my mother's number. A jolt went through me. I hadn't heard from her in months. Hesitantly, I pressed answer. "Claire, it's Mom," she said, sounding slightly frazzled. "Your sister is in trouble." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "She got a serious ankle injury during rehearsals in France," Mom continued. "The doctors say she might need surgery. She's devastated. She might not dance for a year, maybe longer." Paused, searching for the right words. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "How can I help?" Mom's voice trembled. "We need money. We've used up most of our savings sending Ivy abroad. And there's no insurance that covers this. The hospital is in Switzerland, and it's very expensive." A million conflicting emotions flooded me. This was the mother who never once attended my award ceremonies. The mother who spent my college fund on Ivy's training. The mother who told me to settle for less because Ivy had a future. Yet she was also the woman who gave birth to me. And Ivy, for all her overshadowing, was my sister. I bit my lip. "How much do you need?" I asked quietly, cursing the part of me that was so quick to surrender. Mom named a figure. It wasn't small, but I had the fellowship stipend, some savings from my part-time job, and Aunt Angela had insisted on giving me more, though I'd mostly refused. "I'll see what I can do," I said. The line fell silent, and I detected a soft exhale of relief from Mom. We hung up. I didn't feel relief, though. Felt cold, numb. I remembered Aunt Angela's words. "They don't deserve you." But I also heard an echo from childhood. "We're family." Sighing, I transferred almost half my savings to my parents' account the next day. Enough for an initial payment on Ivy's medical bills. I told them it was a loan. They said, "Yes, of course, dear." But we both knew I'd never see that money again. Time passed. Ivy's surgery apparently went well, though she was stuck in rehabilitation for months. My parents rarely updated me except to ask for more money. Meanwhile, I sold my novel, my fellowship novel, to a small publishing house that specialized in up-and-coming authors. The advance wasn't huge, but it was an affirmation that I was on a real path. The day I signed the contract, I felt so proud. I emailed my parents the good news, hoping for a spark of recognition. Dad's reply came hours later. "That's nice. We'll call you if we need more help with Ivy's rehab bills." No congratulations. No interest. Just a business-like acknowledgement. I pressed my lips together, tears threatening to fall, and typed a single line in my journal. Even success can feel empty if no one cares to witness it. But Aunt Angela cared. She threw me a little party in her backyard with homemade cookies, a banner that read, "Congrats, Claire," and a few of her neighbors who'd heard about my accomplishment. That simple gathering was more genuine than any applause I'd ever get from my parents. I poured my heartbreak into rewriting the second half of my novel, infusing it with the raw pain of being used and overlooked. My editor was thrilled. "This is your best work yet," she said. My book launched quietly, but it gained traction among certain circles of readers who found themselves in the pages. Other overlooked siblings, other children overshadowed by a star in their family. I received emails, messages on social media, stories from strangers who thanked me for telling their story too. I realized I wasn't alone. Months turned into a year. My novel did well enough for me to pay my bills without extra part-time work. The publisher offered me a new contract for a second book. I was on my way, forging a writing career, forging a life. I saw pictures of Ivy on social media, apparently out of rehab but not dancing yet. She wore a supportive brace on her ankle. Her eyes looked hollow. I felt pity, not envy. She was broken too. The difference was, our parents still hovered near her like bodyguards, while I had to build my fortress alone. Then came a twist. My father reached out to me via text. "Claire, call me as soon as you can. We have a proposal that could benefit everyone in the family." My chest tightened, but curiosity won over. Dialed. "Claire," Dad began, his voice slick. "Your sister can't dance for the foreseeable future, So she's thinking of opening a small dance studio for kids. We'd like you to invest. You write stories, you have a creative mind, you might help us with marketing, plus we know you've got some extra savings. A laugh nearly burst out of me, but it came out more as a harsh exhale. They wanted me to invest in Ivy's studio. After I just spent thousands on her medical bills. After they never once recognized my achievements. Dad, I said evenly, I'm busy with my writing. Besides, I don't have much to spare. But we're family, he insisted. And you must have money from that book you published. Don't be selfish. My blood roared in my ears. You think I'm being selfish? After paying for half her surgery. After never once hearing you say, we're proud of you, Claire. Dad, do you have any idea how it feels to only matter when you can provide something? Silence, thick as cement, stretched over the line. Finally he said, we raised you. You owe us. Hung up. My hand shook. I stared at the phone, fighting back tears of fury. All the childhood memories flooded in. The ignoring, the overshadowing, the dismissals. I owe them. I whispered to the empty room. They owe me everything. They owe me a lifetime of apologies. A week later I got a call from Aunt Angela. Claire, honey, your mother told me they're very upset you won't help with Ivy's dream. You okay? I let out a bitter laugh. I'm fine, Auntie. I'm just done. She sighed. I understand. I can't force you to do anything, but please don't let their behavior tear you apart inside. Keep moving forward with your life. Closed my eyes. I will. So I poured that anger and betrayal into my next manuscript. My second book turned from a casual concept into a personal saga about a woman who invests everything in a family that never invests in her. I unleashed all the pain, all the disillusionment. I wanted it to be raw, real, and satisfying. This was my revenge, the only one I dared to enact, turning the tragedies they inflicted on me into something that might help others. As the months passed, I refused any calls from my parents that hinted at more financial demands. They texted me, "You're ungrateful. We gave you life, and now you abandon us in our time of need." I blocked them. They tried to contact Aunt Angela. She brushed them off, telling them to handle their problems themselves. I found out through distant cousins that Ivy ended up borrowing money from a wealthy friend to start her dance studio. I felt relief, but also an odd pang of sorrow. Because that friend was someone else stepping in to rescue them, in the same place I once stood. Did they even realize how often they needed rescuing? Probably not. My second novel launched quietly, then soared in popularity. It hit several bestseller lists in the personal growth fiction category, praised for its poignant portrayal of toxic family dynamics and the main character's journey to freedom. Interviews, speaking engagements, recognition came streaming in. I found myself traveling, meeting readers who lined up for autographs, tears in their eyes, saying, "This was my life too." In hotel rooms across the country, I'd lie awake at night thinking, if my parents could see me now, would they still call me worthless? Or would they still be too busy with Ivy? It was around this time that Aunt Angela developed health issues. She began struggling with her mobility, and I'd drive her to doctor's appointments, sit with her during tests, help her manage insurance paperwork. "I'm so sorry you have to deal with this," she kept saying. "I never wanted to burden you." I squeezed her hand. "You're not a burden. You've given me the world. Let me at least be here for you." We found out she had a condition that required ongoing treatment. Expensive, not always covered by insurance. Without hesitation, I offered to pay. She argued at first, then saw the determination in my eyes and relented. "I'm proud of you, Claire," she said softly one afternoon. "Not just because you're successful, but because you have a heart that didn't grow bitter despite everything." I walked onto Aunt Angela's porch that evening, gazing at the fields behind her house. A setting sun tinted the sky with gold and lilac. I felt tears prick my eyes. She saw me truly from the start. Now I had the power to make her life easier, the way she made mine possible. This was what real family meant. Mutual care, not exploitation. While caring for Aunt Angela, I had to slow down my own writing schedule, but my publisher was understanding. My editor said, "Claire, take your time. Your health and family come first." That word, family, echoed in my mind. The difference was now I chose who was family. I no longer had to accept the definition forced on me by birth. More time passed. Aunt Angela stabilized, thanks to the treatments and therapy. Meanwhile, I found a modest house in the same town, wanting to stay close. My success with the novels meant I could buy a comfortable home without a mortgage. Life felt strangely peaceful. I wrote articles about mental health, about forging your path despite dysfunctional upbringings, about the quiet power of resilience. Readers responded with heartfelt messages. I realized this was a calling, not just a job. Then, a day came when Ivy's number appeared on my phone. I'd unblocked them all after a while, if only to maintain boundaries on my own terms. Surprised, I stared at Ivy's name. Picked up. "Claire," she whispered, her voice cracking. I don't know how to say this. Mom and Dad lost a lot of money in that studio. The wealthy friend who invested pulled out, and the place never made enough to stay afloat. They're in debt, big debt. They might lose the house. I felt a twisted sense of déjà vu. "I see," I said, my tone carefully calm. "I know you have no reason to help us," Ivy continued, voice trembling. "But I had to try. Dad said you blocked them. Mom's crying every night. They can't handle everything on their own. They never thought it could fail this badly. I'm sorry." My chest tightened. I remembered the countless times they told me to be realistic, that I was overshadowed by Ivy, that I would never measure up. Now they wanted me to save them. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" I said quietly. Pause. "If you could just lend them money to cover the mortgage for a few months, keep them from losing the house, maybe help renegotiate with the bank." Silence pressed in. My mind whirled. After all these years, was I truly expected to rescue them again? My heart lurched with old hurts, old resentments. Then a thought emerged. Would it bring me any peace to watch them suffer? Or was it time to choose a different path, not for them but for me? "I'll think about it," I said, then I hung up. I paced the length of my living room, the walls feeling too close, my breath short. Aunt Angela sat in a chair by the window, crocheting. She glanced at me over her glasses. "Was that Ivy?" she asked softly. I nodded. What did she want? I exhaled shakily. "They're losing the house. They want me to help." Aunt Angela set her yarn down, folded her hands. "Oh, Claire," she said, sorrow in her tone. "I won't tell you what to do. I know it hurts. I know they've demanded so much and given you so little in return." I sank onto the couch. If I let them drown, I become just as cruel as they were, right? But if I save them, do I let them keep treating me like a bank account? Aunt Angela moved to my side, took my hand. "No. You can set boundaries. You can choose how to help and on what terms. Or not help at all. That's up to you." After a long silence, I made a decision. I called my attorney the next morning, asked about drafting a contract. If I gave them money, it would be documented, legally recognized as a loan with terms. I wouldn't risk being their doormat again. They would have to sign. If they refused, that was their choice. 2 days later, I stood on the old porch of my parents' house. It looked smaller, more run down than the last time I saw it. The paint was peeling. The flowers in the planter boxes were wilted. I wondered if they'd even greeted me, or if they were so deep in despair they wouldn't bother. The door opened and Mom stood there, eyes puffy. Dad was behind her, lines of worry etched into his forehead. Ivy hovered in the background, hugging herself. I stepped inside carefully, like I was entering a cold museum. The living room felt smaller, gloomier. I took a seat on the couch, set my purse beside me, and took out the legal papers. "I heard you need help," I said, my voice measured. "Here's what I can offer." Dad took the papers, scanning them with shaking hands. "What is this?" "It's a formal loan agreement," I said. "I pay off your mortgage arrears and help negotiate a new payment plan with the bank. You pay me back monthly for 5 years." If you default, you forfeit certain assets. And once this is signed, you stop asking me for money without going through the same process again. Mom bit her lip, eyes welling up. Claire, we're family. You don't need to be so formal. I locked my gaze on her. Family? Which family was that? The one that told me I wasn't good enough, used my college fund on Ivy, and then belittled my success? The one that called me a parasite behind my back? The one that demanded money for Ivy's medical bills but never once asked how I was doing? They stared, shame flickering across their faces. Ivy hung her head. I exhaled, remembering Aunt Angela's advice. Boundaries don't have to be cruel. Here's the truth. You need me now, but I refuse to be used the way I was before. If you want my help, you accept my terms. If not, I'll leave, and you deal with the consequences yourselves. Mom started to cry, quietly. Dad's grip on the papers tightened. He ran a trembling hand through his thinning hair. We don't have a choice, do we? I looked at Ivy. Her eyes were watery, lips trembling. She whispered, I'm sorry, Claire. I should have stood up for you. I was so scared of disappointing them. I never thought about how I was disappointing you. A rush of conflicting emotions rose in my chest. Anger, pity, maybe a sliver of compassion. We all have regrets, I said. But that doesn't undo the past. Only actions now matter. Dad took the pen I offered. Slowly, haltingly, he signed. Mom signed next, tears spotting the page. Ivy looked at me, then quietly asked, Do I need to sign too? That's up to you, I said. If you plan to live here and benefit from the rescue, then yes. She nodded, took the pen and scrawled her name. Her shoulders shuddered as she handed the papers back. Thank you, she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. You didn't have to do this. I pressed the contract into my purse and stood. No, I didn't. Outside, the sun hung high in the sky, making the chipped paint on the porch banisters look even more pitiful. I felt a heaviness in my stomach, but also a strange sense of release. This time I'd helped on my own terms. They couldn't chain me with guilt or calls of family. I stepped off the porch, realizing I wasn't the same girl who once tiptoed out that door for Redwood University. Now I was a woman who had seen the power of her own will. In the months that followed, I kept it strictly business. I paid off the mortgage arrears, renegotiated with the bank, and set up an automated repayment plan. Any questions from my parents about help with groceries or a new heater were directed back to me through official channels. My attorney handled it. Meanwhile, I channeled my focus into a new writing project. I realized, with a clarity that still stunned me, that my revenge wasn't about humiliating them. It was about proving that I could stand tall while they remained small in their thinking. Slowly, under the weight of that contract, they began to change, even if just a bit. Dad stopped calling me a parasite or an ungrateful child. Mom wrote a letter, an actual handwritten letter, apologizing for ignoring my achievements. I read it, tears slipping down my cheeks. Was it genuine remorse or a tactic to keep me from cutting them off entirely? Couldn't be sure, but it was something. Ivy, on the other hand, tried to reach out more. She invited me to see the dance studio she was struggling to keep open. I went, carefully curious. It was small, with scuffed mirrors and battered wooden floors. She taught a group of kids, maybe 6 to 9 years old, helping them point their toes and hold their arms elegantly. A faint light of hope flickered in her eyes, a far cry from the vacant stare she'd worn in rehab photos. After class, she stood with me by the door. I messed up a lot, she said quietly. Not just in my own life, but I failed you as a sister. I know you might never forgive me. I don't know if I'll ever forget, I admitted. But I'm trying to move forward. She nodded. Would you come back sometime? I'd like to show you more. The kids love new faces. I paused, then said, maybe, leaving it ambiguous. Outside, I inhaled the crisp air. My phone buzzed, a message from Aunt Angela. Don't forget the doctor's appointment tomorrow. I'll see you bright and early. I smiled, relief flooding me. She was still my anchor in this chaotic sea. 6 months later, my third novel was published, a testament to forging new paths, learning the difference between rightful boundaries and vengeful walls. I dedicated it to Aunt Angela, who helped me see that being overlooked doesn't have to define you forever. It hit the bestseller list in less than a month, bringing me more visibility than ever before. Interview requests poured in, talk shows wanted to feature me, and my social media presence soared. At one of those interviews, the host asked, "Claire, your books often focus on family hurt and personal resilience. Where does that come from?" I thought about it, choosing my words carefully. "I grew up in a household that revolved around my older sister's talents," I explained, my voice steady. "It taught me that if you're not the favorite child, sometimes you have to become your own source of validation." Over the years, I found the strength to step out of that shadow, thanks to one person who believed in me unconditionally. And now, I hope my stories help others realize they aren't alone, that their lives matter, even if the people closest to them don't always see it. Applause echoed in the studio. For a split second, tears pricked my eyes as I thought about the little girl in the hallway, listening to Ivy's singing while everyone else cheered. How far we've come, I thought. After the show, I checked my phone. A text from Mom. "I saw your interview. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry it took me so long to say that." I stared at the screen, a flurry of emotions swirling within me. Anger, relief, longing, hope. Without overthinking, I typed back, "Thank you." Aunt Angela's health improved. We traveled for a short vacation. Her dream was to see the Grand Canyon. I snapped photos of her standing at the edge of that massive canyon, the sun setting behind her, painting the rocks in copper and gold. She looked small yet mighty, like the canyon itself, carved by time and adversity, but breathtakingly resilient. When we returned, a letter waited for me at my house. It was from Ivy. Inside were a few photos of her students dancing, plus a handwritten note. "Thank you for not letting me drown. Maybe someday we can start over." I traced my fingers over the words, felt a small warmth in my chest. Maybe we could, I thought. But it would take time and it would be on my terms. By the following spring, the family finances stabilized, thanks to the loan repayment. Dad even sent me an email with a scanned receipt, showing he'd made an extra payment ahead of schedule. My mother, in phone calls, started asking about my writing, inquiring how many books I planned to publish. It felt surreal, like stepping into an alternate universe, one where maybe they did care. Yet I never forgot what Aunt Angela and I had faced. Our convictions proved this family could turn on us in an instant. I used those memories as fuel for my creativity, crafting characters who overcame far worse. But I also learned that letting go of bitterness didn't mean erasing the lessons. It meant being at peace with the fact that they might never fully understand the hurt they caused. That was okay because I understood it. I'd turned that pain into purpose. A year passed in relative quiet. My parents kept repaying the loan bit by bit. My mother called on holidays, birthdays, sometimes just to say hello. I caught glimpses of Ivy's progress. Her studio attracted a few more students, and she began to incorporate modern dance classes. She posted a short video of her demonstrating a simple routine with her brace off, moving carefully but determinedly. The caption read, "One step at a time." I felt a tug of empathy. She'd once had the world at her feet, forced onto a pedestal by our parents. Now she was building something real. Maybe we were all learning. Then, on a chilly autumn afternoon, as I was editing the final draft of my fourth novel, I heard a knock. Aunt Angela answered the door, then called my name. When I stepped into the living room, I found Mom, Dad, and Ivy standing there, each clutching a small gift bag. My mother's eyes were red, as if she'd been crying. Dad looked pale, hands twitching with nervous energy. Ivy clutched her purse, looking subdued. I froze, heart pounding. "What are you doing here?" Mom spoke first, her voice trembling. "Claire, we've been talking. About everything. We realized we don't deserve your forgiveness, but we want to ask for it anyway. We want you to know we see you now." Tears slid down her cheeks. "We see what we've done. We see your success. We see the pain we caused." Dad cleared his throat. Claire, we brought these small gifts. A token of our apology. Nothing can make up for the years we hurt you, but we want to try. Ivy stepped forward, holding out a bag that contained a neatly folded note on top of a small photo album. Pictures of your awards, the times we missed your ceremonies, your articles, your novels. I compiled them from online archives, from your social media, from your interviews. Sorry, Claire. I want to honor you now, even if it's late. My throat felt tight, and I glanced at Aunt Angela, who stood behind them. She gave me a small nod as if saying, "It's your choice." I took the album with shaky hands, flipping through photos I'd never even realized existed. Screenshots of my writing competition announcements, pictures from Redwood's alumni page, magazine covers featuring my second novel. My heart constricted. After all this time, they had finally tried to see me. Silence draped the room like a heavy curtain. My parents looked at me with watery eyes, uncertain if I'd throw them out or break down. Slowly I drew a breath. "This doesn't erase the hurt," I said, voice quivering. "I can't promise I'll forget. But, thank you for trying." My mother pressed her lips together, tears rolling down her cheeks. "We've been talking to a counselor," she confessed, "learning how to face what we did, how we made Ivy our entire focus and let you be overshadowed." She let out a trembling breath. "We can't change the past, but we want to be different in the future." A wave of emotion crashed over me. Anger, relief, hope, fear. Aunt Angela gently placed a hand on my shoulder, anchoring me. I inhaled slowly. "Then let's see where this goes." Ivy exhaled in what sounded like profound relief, tears threatening to spill. Dad swallowed hard, nodded. We stood there, 4 people with a lifetime of regrets, none of us quite sure how to start over. But for the first time it felt like maybe we had a chance. They stayed for coffee. Aunt Angela joined us. We spoke cautiously, dancing around old wounds, but also acknowledging them. My father stammered an apology for using my college fund on Ivy. Mom shared how she'd felt pressured to make Ivy a star, believing that was the only way to secure our family's future. Ivy admitted she resented the pedestal at times but didn't know how to step off it, especially once she was injured. I didn't promise immediate trust, but I promised to consider letting them in. That was enough for one day. As they left, Dad handed me a check. "The final repayment," he said quietly. I checked the amount. It matched the last portion of the loan. He'd paid it all back. I looked at him amazed. He managed a small, wobbly smile. I walked them to the door, the crisp autumn air swirling around us. My mother squeezed my hand. "You're an incredible woman," she whispered. "We're proud of you." I watched them drive away, a strange mixture of warmth and lingering hurt swirling in my chest. Aunt Angela put an arm around my shoulders. "You okay?" she asked gently. I leaned my head against hers. "I think so. But I'm still scared to trust them." She nodded. "That's natural. Trust comes slowly after so many broken places. But you, my dear, have already won. Whether they change or not, you've built a life they can't diminish." I closed my eyes, letting the crisp breeze wash over me, letting the old wounds breathe. Maybe healing wasn't a single moment, but a quiet, ongoing process. I no longer needed their approval to define me, but it was a relief to know they were at least trying. Months later, on a snowy winter afternoon, I decided to visit Ivy's studio unannounced. I wanted to see if she was truly working hard, truly living a new reality. When I arrived, I saw a group of giggling children running around in pink ballet slippers, waiting for class to start. Ivy was at the front desk, hair pulled into a neat bun, face flushed with the effort of corralling them. She noticed me and froze. "Claire," she whispered, a hesitant smile forming. "I wasn't expecting you." "I wanted to stop by," I said, stepping closer. "Check on how things are going." Her eyes darted to the kids, then back to me. She gestured for me to follow her into a small office. I looked around at the modest space. Some battered chairs, motivational posters, stacks of flyers. Definitely not the glamorous life she once led. But there was a sincerity here. I've got about 2 minutes before class starts, Ivy said, fiddling with her hands. Things are picking up. We're still in debt, but we're stable. The kids, they really love dancing. It's different than the world I grew up in. It's not all about competition or constant perfection. She exhaled shakily. It's more about letting them find joy. I studied her face, noticing faint lines around her eyes, a shadow of longing. I'm glad, I said softly, that you found something real. She blinked quickly, tears threatening. I know it doesn't erase what happened, but I hope we can keep reconnecting. I hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. One day at a time. She smiled, relief shining through. Right. One day at a time. The moment I stepped outside, the cold wind nipped at my cheeks, but my heart felt strangely warm. I realized revenge didn't have to be about seeing them suffer. My revenge had been living a life where their neglect no longer defined me, where I found success on my own terms. And in the process, I discovered that sometimes the best revenge is forging your own path so brightly that their darkness can no longer touch you. In the months that followed, we grew closer in small increments. There were no grand gestures, just small acts of acknowledgement. A text from Dad congratulating me on a new book deal, a call from Mom inviting me to a quiet family dinner, Ivy sending me pictures of her students performing a holiday routine with proud little smiles. I said yes to that dinner eventually, bringing Aunt Angela along as a buffer. It was awkward at first, memories of old wounds swirling in the background, but we found ways to talk without fighting, ways to share without overshadowing. One evening after the meal, Dad quietly set an old photo album in front of me. Inside, to my surprise, were pictures from my childhood. Photos I didn't know existed. My first day of kindergarten, me holding a small sign with shaky handwriting. A shot of me reading on the living room floor, ignoring the camera. A short note Dad had scribbled on a margin. Claire is so serious about her books. That small line caused a lump in my throat. Because apparently at least once he had noticed. Mom said gently, "We should have treasured you more, sweet girl. I'm sorry." My tears fell onto the plastic protectors of the photos, my chest aching. "Thank you for sharing these," I whispered. That night, I drove home feeling raw and hopeful. Aunt Angela patted my hand. "This is how we heal," she said. "Little by little." Looking back, I see how everything changed from that day my mother led me out of the living room when I was 9. All the loneliness, the heartbreak, the quiet nights spent writing stories about worlds where I mattered. I see how it forged me into someone strong enough to stand on her own, wise enough to set boundaries, and compassionate enough to still care in the end. I see how Aunt Angela's unwavering belief in me became the cornerstone of my resilience. I see how my family, for all their flaws, is learning to be something new. Now I'm 30 years old, on the verge of releasing my 5th novel. The reviews from early readers are promising, and my publisher expects it to do exceptionally well. I sit at my writing desk, gazing at the old spiral notebook Aunt Angela once gave me, where it all began. Its edges are torn, pages yellowed, but I can still read those first stories I wrote when I was small and forgotten. My phone dings with a new message. It's from Mom. "Congratulations on your new book, sweetie. We can't wait to read it." I close my eyes, letting the sunlight fill my office. No overshadowing, no quiet resentments. Just me living the life I fought for. I pick up my pen and scribble down a final note in my personal journal. I am seen, I am heard, I am loved, and I love myself enough to never be invisible again. I breathe deeply, aware of how far I've come from that little girl in the hallway listening to applause she believed would never be hers. It may have taken a lifetime, but I found the spotlight in my own way. And perhaps that is the happiest ending of all.